Yes, Ellen.
So, of course, now we're recording, but first things first, is who's going to eat?
Oh, I didn't know there was a lunch. Sure, I'll go. All right, that worked out. That was my directorial debut. Let's start off with an opening prayer, if you'll please join me. Holy Spirit, come and renew us. Open our hearts and allow us to receive your word in the way good soil is receptive to a life-bearing seed. Let the love of God take hold and become rooted in us, springing up and bringing forth the fruit of love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control in our lives. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. All right, now for our icebreaker, I was hoping we could go around the room and please say your names loudly and clearly for our friends on the TV and answer, do you have a significant life memory that involves a garden? Involves a garden. Yes, okay, go ahead, start with Karen.
Oh, she's got to think fast.
Yes, she does. Walk slowly, Ellen.
A life memory.
Yes, and please state your name, Karen.
Karen Cosby. I have significant garden memories
Oh, good.
my whole life. I guess what I came from a family of florists. We've had a florist in our family since 1884.
Wow.
And we had like 8 greenhouses. And in my childhood, my granddad was the grower. And I have so many wonderful memories of going into the greenhouses with him. He would take off a snapdragon and snap it on my finger. And he grew tomatoes in one greenhouse, and he would always have a little salt shaker on the sink in the lower greenhouse, and he pop off a little porter tomato, the little round ones, and wash it off and give it to me. Anyway, I have nothing but wonderful, warm memories of gardens.
Thank you so much. No, you did not. You took the exact right amount of time I was hoping you'd take. You're done. I'm like, oh, perfect. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, this is Carlene. When I was growing up, my grandmother lived 700 miles away from us, but I got to spend the summers at her place, and she had a very large garden in the backyard. It's still in town, but it was big. And rabbits, she raised rabbits. But I do remember sitting and doing the peas, shelling the peas with my grandmother. And that was, just a memory with her, that even when she got old and had Alzheimer's, she wasn't shelling peas, but she'd sit there and do her fingers as if she's shelling peas.
Wow. This is Cynthia May. I was going to say my mother was like me, but I guess I'm like my mother. Neither of us really had a green thumb, but I remember that she grew roses and gardenias, and I loved the smell of the gardenias then. And I can remember going out and cutting roses off the rose bush on Mother's Day. And we would all get red roses, and my dad always had to get a white one. And I always thought his white one was so pretty until I understood what it stood for.
This is Kim Malcolm. Carlene took mine. My grandmother had a significant garden, and by the time I came along, she didn't do as much anymore, but she grew food for the family, that when my mother and her siblings were growing up. And but we would shell peas on her back porch or on her swing on, the porch swing on the side or whatever, but we always shelled peas when we were down there with her, and she lived close enough that we did that a lot.
This is Sandra Hurlbert.
I didn't hear what y'all said before, so if
Oh,
I
I'm so
repeat
sorry.
something.
Our question
okay.
today
Yeah, just-
is, do you have a significant life memory that involves a garden? Now all their answers make more sense.
Yeah, my grandfather, I learned like what different trees were from him. He always did gardening, and my father did too. It's like I'd follow my dad out after work and help him water the plants, the vegetables and stuff. And so I like gardening. There's things I want to dig up from my parents' house and take to mine. I know that there's the irises that they have over there were at my grandparents' house. And I want to dig those up. Yeah. There's a rose bush that was at my cousin's grandmother's house. That I don't know, those are harder to move, but it got moved once, so maybe again.
If
We'll
anybody
see.
can do it, you can do it, Sandra.
We'll see. Garden experience? Nope. No gardening for Nancy.
Okay, this is Susan. And I grew up in a very small town of about 200 people in rural Southwest Missouri, but I was a town kid. But
were a what
nevertheless,
kid?
I was a town kid.
Town kid.
It was exciting if I got to go home on the school bus with a friend or something like that. But anyway, that's another story. But anyway, my dad was a rural letter carrier when I was younger. Later, he became postmaster in that little town. But anyway, my mom, my dad, all four of us girls would help plant a garden because they had a big backyard, and went back behind the shrubs. There was an area we'd plant a garden every year. We'd plant this garden, but we had to give it up because my father, who was a rural letter carrier, would open the mailbox in the summertime to put the mail in. It'd be full of tomatoes or green beans or corn or whatever was in season, whatever they were growing. And he would come home every afternoon with all of these vegetables and fruit and everything when they were in
Oh,
season.
that's
So
so
we tilled
cool.
over our garden and planted grass and made a little baseball, softball area. We'd go out and play ball. So anyway, it was really
Awesome.
nice growing up. It was an idyllic childhood. I mean, it really was. I'm so sorry that our children can't have that experience that I had growing up. It was wonderful. Anyway, it included that kind of garden that had to be tilled over because of the kindness
But
or
if
the
you build it, they
generosity
will
of our
come, right?
neighbors.
I heard that somewhere.
This is Judy. I really don't have much, except I did live with my grandmother and grandfather, and they had a garden. She did. And I would go out and help her do the pull corn, shuck corn, pull the green beans, snap the green beans, and then she canned them. And I'd have to take them down to the cellar. Oh my gosh. Underground. I hated that more than anything because I knew it was dark. I knew there were snakes there. And if y'all know what I'm talking about, it's underneath. It was in Oklahoma. It was underneath the whatever, the back. And it was scary. But anyway, it was great memories, great memories of working them there. Except I tried to find something else to do when it's time to take. And she said, Judy, I need your help. Okay, Grandma. Anyway, it was great memories too.
Well, I guess this is Ann McCulley. My grandmother, we lived with my grandmother during the war, and I can remember a horse with a plow coming up and plowing part of their backyard for a garden. But also, when you talk about picking peas, she lived in Houston and we later moved to Fort Worth, and we would stop when we would go visit her and pick up peas at a roadside stand, and Mother kept us busy shelling peas all the way. So.
Nice. Hi, this is Peggy. My first memories of gardening, we had my mother's mother was really a garden. She's a green thumb, great at that sort of thing. And she would come over to our house and they would work in the yard doing paths kind of through it, and planting bushes. And guess what I got to do? Weed. That's what Nancy was saying. I'm like, so at first I was like, no, I'd rather sit on the riding lawnmower or do something like that. Yeah. But then got older, and my uncle, he was single and had moved back with his, anyway, he was kind of in the homes in the middle of, in fact, it was across the street from the main library in Memphis. But he tilled the whole backyard and gardened. I mean, he had everything. I didn't have to weed, but the wonderful thing is I love the okra, but he'd bring me all these tender, when they're little bitty. And that's just a happy memory he gave to me with that.
I have a memory.
Go for it.
Okay, when I was, under 10, my grandfather was a tree doctor, a self-appointed one, I suppose. I don't know. This was way back. But anyway, he had gardens, and in particular, persimmon trees. And I can remember him walking me through his garden, and then coming to the persimmon tree, he would cut a piece of the fruit open. And there was, in fact, I looked it up while y'all were talking to make sure I remembered correctly. But when he opened it up, you would see the seeds. And the folklore is, if you can predict the coming winter, whether by slicing a persimmon in half, if you see a spoon shape, there will be a lot of heavy, wet snow. A fork shape means light, powdery snow and a milder winter. And I remember that fascinated me for him to, tell me about that.
Fun.
Ellen?
So, yeah, mine is because I have such a brown.
This is Ellen Dittman.
This is Ellen Dittman. Because I have such a brown thumb, mine is about going to the Garden Tomb in Israel. And having communion with our folks from Canyon Creek there. And it was really just, we don't know if that was exactly where the tomb is. And there's a couple of places that they think it might have been. But this one is really just, at least, in your mind's eye, this is very much what it would look like.
It's definitely in the right country.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. And it was really just, it was so powerful.
I have no garden memories. That was just not something that was done in my family. So,
But gardening, building the garden at the back of Friend's place. Do you have anything to do with that?
oh yeah, I always wanted a cutting garden. That was the only thing I never finished with my garden.
Well, I'm the opposite. I have a ton of garden memories.
Okay, don't forget to tell us your name.
my-
And Pam, I don't think you did.
Laura. My parents have a farm up by Lake Texoma. So when I was pretty much old enough to walk, I was old enough to help in the garden and I did.
Online.
No, wait, before online. Here you are. Tell everybody your name.
I'm Emma. I don't particularly have any gardening stories. The ones I do remember involve the CCPC garden. Yeah, when we were in youth group a few years back, we used to do a lot with the garden. We'd come out a few days every year, and we'd tend to the garden. We'd either pull weeds or we'd put in new soil or plant seeds, whatever needed to be done with the garden. And we kind of just all enjoy ourselves and talk amongst one another while doing that. So
Wonderful.
Yeah. All right, Anne?
I have lots of traveling memories of wonderful gardens, but I think the one that comes to mind, I was reminded of it as people were talking about growing up. My father had a garden that he planted. He went to college after the war. And so when I was about 4, he had his first job and he planted a garden behind our house. And I'm sure it was to raise food, because first job right out of college, we didn't have much money. And so he, of course, raised all these wonderful vegetables. He expected me to eat them. And I liked green beans, and that was pretty much it. And I can remember him, I ate his green beans, and I can remember him sitting at the table with me for long periods of time after dinner and encouraging me, shall we say, to eat some of the others that I didn't much care for. But it's funny, I grew up, and I like almost all vegetables now, but I sure didn't, But that is a sweet memory of my dad and of gardens.
Victoria?
I'm not a gardener myself, but my great grandparents lived here in Dallas. And after they, didn't know them, but my mom tells the story of how when they passed away and they had to sell the house, they transplanted a little mini rose bush to my parents' yard, which is now where Catherine lives. And it was the rose bush that every morning my great grandmother would pluck off one of the little mini roses so my great grandfather could put it in his buttonhole and wear it to work.
Oh. That's sweet.
Melanie? Melanie clearly lives in a garden because somebody shrunk her.
I thought this would be perfect for this chapter. I have so many memories growing up in the country, and and I mean, we would go to the lake and bring home, all of us kids would shuck peas, and then my mom would ask us, all of us kids on the horses, the neighbors would come up with their horses, and we would be gone from dawn to dusk, and she'd say, before you leave, go down into the woods and get blackberries and raspberries so I can make jam.
Yeah.
And so those are some fun stories. We had buckets, and one of my friend's horses was acting up, and she was afraid she was going to spill this bucket of blackberries, and she kept saying, Katie, take my bucket. And we all showed horses on the weekends, so she was on her show horse, Katie was, and who was a pinto, so it had a white hindquarters.
I love pinto.
So she kept saying Katie, and Katie kept saying, I can't. Well, when Stacy finally got her horse under control, she takes that bucket and she grabs a handful of blackberries and she slaps Katie's horse on the white spot and just went and smeared it all the way down. And you can get those stains out. So that horse that weekend, we washed and scrubbed, but she ended up having to put baking soda on it for the horse show on that white.
That was awful.
Well, yeah. And then lots of memories. And Emma, thank you so much, because we have lots of memories of the church garden. And when you guys would come and weed in the spring, especially, that was the best ever. It was we just all delighted in that. And then Morgan and I have a garden, and we keep building onto it. And so lots of fun memories, and we plan our trips around going to New York as to when the corn's going to be ready. And we have done some things riding in the corn with the corn higher than the horses, and we would come out of the corn and said, children of the corn. So yeah, lots of memories, and I love this chapter of the different meanings of the garden. So great question. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Judy.
Judy Smith, and our family was always big into flowers, and my dad especially into gardening, and he probably influenced all of us kids the most in the world of nature, because he was a big hunter also. So you'd go hiking with him, and he knew all the trees and which plant did this and which plant did that, and but he always had a big garden at his house, and he also grew blueberry bushes and had a whole big row of them. And we have such great memories of all of us, all of our cousins, and all of the nieces and nephews. Every early summer, you'd meet in the blueberry bushes, and all of our boys, when they were little bitty, and everybody would be picking their blueberries and filling their buckets and
Nobody had a
taking them
white
home
horse?
and freezing them, but having a great time.
But Judy, nobody had a white horse when you were doing all that?
No.
blueberry picking? Okay.
And everybody had on old clothes too.
Yeah.
All right, Susan, you've shared with us already. I come from a very long line of city dwellers. And so I don't know anyone in my family going back generations who didn't live in a city or at least a suburb. But my mom was in part of a garden club at one point, and I teased her. I said, Mom, why are you a part of a garden club? You don't even garden. And she said, but I appreciate gardens. We always tease her about that, but you appreciate gardens. So, anyway, I do remember though, husking corn with my grandfather when I was little. That was one of my first memories, but we did buy it at the grocery store. So, all right. So next up, Emma has a fantastic video she wants to show us. Did you see that? She put on her spot. Oh my gosh. After she performs a tap dance.
Now, this chapter of The Grace of Les Miserables is a bit of a departure from the rest of the book. Much like poverty is a character in the story that unites all of the other characters together, there's an even more powerful and more hidden character that is a constant reminder of hope. Anytime someone discovers a glimmer of hope or love in Hugo's story, it almost always happens in a garden. What do you think about when you hear the word garden? Do you think about something magnificent, or do you think about the squash and tomatoes in the backyard? Do you think about the Garden of Eden, or maybe the Garden of Gethsemane? Even though the various gardens throughout Hugo's story aren't a proper character, they play an important role. Gardens play an important role in our faith as well. If I had the amazing opportunity to give the Bible a title, I would call it The Tale of Three Gardens. There's a Garden of Eden at the beginning of the story in which humanity walks with God without shame and with mutual and shared adoration. Jesus experiences agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. When Jesus is on the cross, he tells the thief, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." And paradise means blessed garden. And we find a picture of this blessed garden in the garden tomb, when that tomb is empty on the day of Jesus' resurrection. At the end of it all, when heaven and earth become one, there will be a tree of life in the center of the holy city, when God and all of creation rest in each other. So, in a way, God's story is a tale of three gardens: the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Gethsemane in the garden tomb, and the city garden with the tree of life at its center. Each garden throughout Les Miserables offers a different perspective on our walk with God. Monsieur Bienvenu, the priest that offers Valjean a new life, spends his evenings in the garden. For the priest, the garden is a symbol of Sabbath and rest. Sabbath plays a huge role in our story with God. God commands that we keep the Sabbath holy and that we set time apart to simply be with God. There's a story in Scripture when Jesus was at a dinner party and the Pharisees present a man in need of healing before him, but it was the Sabbath, and they wanted to see what Jesus would do. Jesus asks them whether it is lawful to heal on the Sabbath, but the Pharisees are silent. Jesus heals the man and sends him on his way. He then asks them if they had a child or an ox that fell into a well on the Sabbath, they would certainly pull it out. In other words, Jesus is asking them that if they had something of value that had fallen into a well, they would most certainly pull it out. But this man that was callously presented to Jesus as a pawn for his own entrapment, apparently holds no value for them. This is the Pharisees' transgression. Sometimes when we think of transgression, we think of something that we've done wrong or something we've done to cause harm. But in the Hebrew Scriptures, transgression means something like passing through without paying mind. And maybe I'm only speaking for myself, but this happens more often than I would like to admit. going through the motions, not really listening, thinking I'm too busy. Maybe you're doing it right now while watching this DVD. How often do we pass through without paying mind? The Pharisees were not paying this man any mind, and that's the lesson that Jesus wants us to see. The antidote for transgression is Sabbath. Sabbath is a time of mindfulness. It is a time set apart to meditate on God and what God has done and what God is doing in our life. It's a time of awareness of the blessings that we too often take for granted. Monsieur Bienvenu spends every night walking through his garden, so he is keenly aware of God's graceful presence. This is why giving Valjean a second chance seems to come naturally to him. It's almost second nature. And this is what Sabbath does. It begins to change who we are. It is the sanctifying grace of God that offers transformation. Valjean finds himself to be a gardener in the convent that is giving he and Cosette protection and lodging. For Valjean, this garden isn't Sabbath, but hard work. Sometimes our walk with God does take hard work. Sometimes it takes tilling and planting and pruning and harvesting, and none of these are easy. But this doesn't mean Sabbath isn't present. Just before entering the Holy Land, God tells Moses to tell the people that they will work the land for 6 years. But in the 7th year, they shall let the land rest. And then in the 50th year, they will have a year of Jubilee, where all the debts are canceled and the land is returned to their ancestral family. This is the Jubilee for which Valjean is searching. His work day in and day out is a means of finding an escape from his past. Can you imagine what the world would be like if we maintained the year of the Jubilee, where all debts were canceled and land was returned to its ancestral ownership? The world would certainly look different than it does today. The priest's garden represents Sabbath, and Valjean's garden represents hard work. But not all gardens are peaceful and well manicured. The garden in which Marius and Cosette choose to meet in is secret and wild and overgrown, and it represents the passion that they have for each other. There isn't a plan, there isn't much order to it. It just is what it is. Sometimes we are simply called to leave nature as it is. Think of a national forest or a wildlife refuge. Sometimes the best way to care for creation is simply to let it be. Our first job as humans was to till and keep the garden. Caring for creation is written into our job description. Sometimes we accomplish this by setting land apart and allowing God to be the gardener. Other times we are called to set up laws to help keep us accountable and ensure that our air is clean and our water is left unpolluted. Other times we're called to raise an alarm and to call attention to the ways in which we're causing great harm to creation and what God has offered. Other times we are simply called to appreciate nature's beauty and magnificence. Sometimes a garden is what offers us sustenance and an economy. What is your relationship with nature? Does your community of faith have a recycling program or scouts who go on hikes to revel in God's glory of what God has created? Because our first job description was to till and keep a garden, churches should be the ones to lead the charge to care for creation. It seems like our home here on earth is the only home we'll ever have. It was our first responsibility, and it is a difficult responsibility, but it is our calling. Sometimes in Les Miserables, gardens represent Sabbath, hard work, and responsibility. Other times they are wild and unruly. At the end of it all, these gardens represent grace. Grace offers mindfulness of God's activity, that activity in us and in the world. Grace, though freely offered, takes work to accept. Sometimes grace seems wild and offered with reckless abandon when it is offered to those who we think don't deserve it. Our story with God began in a garden. Christ wrestled and anguished in a garden and was raised in a garden. And one day God will create a new heaven and a new earth with the tree of life at its center, and God and creation will be one. But the story isn't finished. After Marius and Cosette have been married, the uprising is over, Valjean has been forgiven and finds reconciliation, Hugo leaves us with a provocative image. The story ends with two children begging. They're still looking for shelter. They have no garden for Sabbath or for work or for love. It is a reminder to us all that our work is never done. And maybe this is the true grace of Les Miserables. Hugo takes us on a journey through the need for redemption, the importance of justice, the sin of poverty, the love of joy, the sacrifice of revolution, and the beauty of God's presence. And then, at the end, there is a graceful reminder that there is still work to be done for the glory of God.
All right. Any thoughts, questions, or comments inspired from the video?
I, of course, have one.
Well, I'm glad you do.
So I don't know if y'all know, but Craig Condit is just passionate about nature and has done such a great job over, kind of beautifying, taming, letting parts be wild across the parking lot over there. And so the hope is at some point to have a labyrinth and then also a prayer walk through there. So it's yeah.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
All right. What did you think about his discussion of the gardens in the Bible? I'd never thought about that before, that it begins and ends with a garden and that garden is the central point in the middle. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Can you think of any other Bible gardens in the Bible other than Eden, Revelation, Gethsemane, Garden Tomb? Well, I can think of like farmland, I guess, like when like Boaz and Ruth, like when she got to go glean the wheat after the harvest, and a lot of farming. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Gardens, farms, those are different. Okay. City girl. No. Yep, my family can trace their roots back to the 1600s in cities.
Yes.
So my dad was born on this tiny island called Manhattan. So anywho, I was thinking we had two verses that he talked about here. Actually, let's just read one of them. Does anybody have a Bible handy? Isaiah chapter 51, verse 3. There's a little garden inspired poem in there. I was thinking maybe we could read that. Chapter 51, verse 3.
Wait, I didn't got it. Sorry, I'm slow on the job.
Okay, Isaiah 51:3, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Lord will surely comfort Zion and will look with compassion on all her ruins. He will make her deserts like Eden, her wastelands like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness will be found in her, thanksgiving and the sound of singing.
What do you think? Look, another garden. Good one. There's some pretty poetry in the Bible, isn't there? All right. And then would someone like to read aloud Revelation chapter 22, verses 1 through 5? This is that garden he refers to at the very end. It's near the back of your book if you're looking. 1 through 5. Thanks, Karen.
When the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as, excuse me, as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb, down the middle of the great street of the city. On each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree are for healing of the nation. No longer will there be any curse. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. There will be no more night. They will not need the light of the lamp or the light of the sun, for the Lord will give them light, and they will reign forever and ever.
Sorry,
Any-
what chapter was that, Heather?
That was Revelation chapter 22, verses 1 through 5.
Thank you.
No problem. Any general observations about that passage that Karen just read for us? Sound hopeful? Bad? Redemption. Okay. Oh. Well, then let's go ahead and split into our small groups. And I posted 6 questions. I think there were 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe there was 4. I don't know. There's some questions I posted on Realm. You want to look at those, and Emma has those that she can put up there also for our small group discussion. Let's see, what time is it? So it's 10:47. So let's come back at 11:10. That should give us plenty of time, right? If everybody's finished way before that, just let me know. That doesn't sound like a group I was in. All right. Hi, ladies.
Oh,
Oh.
we have lots more Florida stories.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Judy, you're dancing on the wall.
She's more talented than the rest of us.
Who had something that came out of that small group discussion that you just want to share with everyone because it was so fantastic?
Who wants to go?
And share the meditation you were talking about.
Oh, well, I think I've shared that before, but a friend of mine did a meditation years and years and years ago at a retreat that I went to, where she talked about an encounter with Jesus, where you visualize walking toward this had to do with a garden, walking toward a garden, and you come to a fence, and you open the gate and you walk through the gate and close the gate, and you're in this beautiful garden, and there's a bench there, and Jesus is sitting on the bench, and you go to the bench and you sit down, and you're sitting with Jesus, and you have a nice conversation with Jesus on the bench in the garden, in the beautiful garden.
Yes.
And I'm sure there was more to it than that, but that's what I remember.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us. All right, where do we have the little microphone thing? Okay, is there anyone here who would like to share something from their group that came out that they wanted to? Susan, thank you.
We didn't get all the way done, but we were on question 3. And how does the garden stand with a powerful symbol of hope? We talked about the cycles of, how the garden, it comes up every year, it grows, it blooms, it goes through all these cycles. And you always know that when spring comes, that things are going to start coming up in that garden and that it's going to be beautiful.
Unless
within a
I'm the
few
one that's
weeks.
planting it, then there's no.
Yeah, renewal and hope.
Mhm. What else?
We got that too, with Ellen's help.
Well,
So I am not a good gardener, and but Craig Condit is, and he helped with our backyard.
Ooh.
And a bunch of the plants froze and I was digging some up. I can at least dig up. But I think I dug up one too early because the roots were really, they were really established. Some of them, blink, you know,
Yeah.
and then, you know, I caught on real quick. I did
He's gonna
not
make a
save,
gardener of you yet, Ellen.
I did not save the one plant. I murdered it, but there was another one that had, you know, and it was just like you could see the green in the, you know, it's like, isn't that amazing? Y'all are nodding like you know. And then there was this, there was this one that was like just totally brown and this little bitty green that was new growth. And, you know, that's what I just love. The
Yes.
life. Yeah. New life
Yeah.
out of death.
Yeah. Yes.
One thing in our group we talked about was Karen was talking about going to Giverny in France and seeing Monet's gardens and how those were restful, a symbol of hope. They created beauty, just all of the things. And I agreed with her. I've been there and it's my favorite day trip from Paris. But then Kim was saying she's taken lots of tours to Paris and it's very difficult to get there. And so we talked about it. We decided, you know, next summer there's a trip to Scotland, to Iona and all those things, which is kind of like a great place for rest and quiet. And we thought, well, maybe we'll do the opposite and we'll take a trip to Paris and it'll be the loud, not so quiet trip to see gardens. Create beauty, because there's beauty in both situations, right? Right, Kim, we're in for that, right? Okay, yeah, okay. Anyone else have anything they wanted to say? All right, well then let's go ahead and do prayer requests. And I would like to hear from everyone. There's always some way we can pray for you. So